The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody, to Wednesday Lunch and Learn. As you know, we have Martin Berman. Apologize for the delay. We had multiple technical problems today. I think Martin said Mercury is in retrograde, and that's certainly showing up today. But we have Marvin on board, and we're all set to go. And as you know from past presentations, he's one of the leading experts on Photobio. He's in touch with what's going on in the research. And remember to mute yourselves. Be welcome to ask him questions as he talks. And as you can hear, somebody's talking in the background who should be muting themselves and has not followed through with their civic duties.
Yes, mute. Yeah, okay.
All right, they did.
You have the power of mute.
I didn't. They actually muted themselves. That's commendable.
Oh, marvelous.
Okay, so those of you who don't mute yourself, I will mute you, and otherwise feel free to ask questions. Marvin?
Hi. I presented a bit of this a while back, not too long ago, and so I'm going to just run through, for the benefit of those who weren't around last time, I want to just go over what it is that we've been doing at Quiet Mind. The background story is that basically I learned about neurofeedback from Len Oakes in 1996 and thought that what he was doing was neurofeedback. Imagine my surprise when I started working in the outer fringes of what neurofeedback was and started to then explore the other aspects and have now been incorporating neurofeedback, QEEG-driven neurofeedback, and other forms over the last, oh my God, it's a long time, isn't it? Anyway, what happened is that we discovered that the neurofeedback was effective for neurodegenerative symptoms associated with cognition, but that what we weren't able to do was affect the underlying disease process, the neurodegenerative process, using neurofeedback alone. And that's when we explored the use of photobiomodulation, and specifically a technology that was developed in the UK and studied at Durham University in their neuronal physics department by Paul Chazot, who's a senior lecturer there. And the study sponsor and developer was a guy named Gordon Dougal. And what they were using was 1,065 to 1,075 nanometer pulsed infrared light, and they were pulsing it at 10 hertz. The specific response that we saw when we took one of our patients and used this was that there was an almost immediate improvement in both cognitive and behavioral functioning in the patient who was in fairly mid-stage dementia. And so it became clear that the photobiomodulation was able to address the tissue level pathology by virtue of stimulating increased production of ATP and enhancing immune system functioning. And that the neurofeedback was then something that could be used to modify and, in a sense, re-normalize the neural connectivity. So that's what we've been up to since about 2008. And we're now doing a clinical trial with Texas A&M, and I'll show you some data on that. But Texas A&M's Department of Neurosurgery, and specifically the Baylor Research Institute, which is connected with Baylor Scott and White Hospital in Temple, Texas. So the chairman of that department is a guy named Jason Wang, and he and I are the co-principal investigators for that study. And so let me just start by, giving you an idea of our agenda. So our agenda is now to focus on integrating interventions that can both facilitate repair, regrowth, and retraining of brain function. And so what this overview is basically covering are these background areas of what's memory loss, how do you improve it, what's an optimal treatment look like, and then our pilot trial that we did in Texas, and then specifically one woman that I've been working with for a long time. And this is basically a pitch for the clinical trial that we're running, but we're now we're at the last 20% of recruitment. So in any event, let's start. So I think we all can agree that memory loss is really a systemic disorder, and that the single molecule idea is not something that's got a lot of legs and a lot of efficacy, especially after 500 different trials of the single molecule solution having failed so far. But all of these different aspects of life are contributing to the systemic problems that we see manifesting as memory loss. And here, we're talking about different types of memory loss. I don't think I need to go into this with you, but the whole idea is that different aspects of memory loss are associated with different kinds of underlying conditions, pathological conditions, that can constitute memory loss. And what we see is that there are about 70 different types of dementia that have different etiologies, and different combinations of memory loss are evident in those different disorders. So these are some of the cognitive and psychological changes that we see in people with dementia and how it affects their daily functioning. When we look at the whole idea of dementia and neurodegeneration, the two things that we see as being the basic underlying contributory factors are hypoperfusion and inflammation. And that's being borne out in the current research on dementia. So what we're trying to do is look at how photobiomodulation can address both hypoperfusion and inflammation. And what we see is that the near-infrared stimulation can certainly increase cerebral capillary flexibility and viability. So it actually promotes a resistance to further injury, and it also increases the flow of oxygen through the capillaries, especially the microcapillaries in the farther edges of the cortex, which is where we start to see the hypoperfusion taking place initially in dementia. The ranges that we're using for stimulation in near-infrared are from about 750 to about 1400. And like I said, the one that we're using in the clinical trials is 1065 to 1075. This is just a study that was done at Bristol University showing that you can measure the amount of light getting through the different layers of the skull and the scalp down into the cortex. And so we were able to see that about 10% of the ambient light emitted at the surface was then being measured at the cortex surface. And this is the mechanism of action. And basically, we're looking at the respiratory chain in the mitochondria, and that the cytochrome C oxidase actually does respond to this particular frequency of light, and it increases the output of ATP. This is one of those slides that you have to have if there's a molecular biologist in the audience, so that they don't think you're full of crap. So this is the this is the indication of how infrared light stimulates the reduction of apoptosis in the cell by stimulating specific heat shock proteins and a cascade of other neurotransmitter activity to block cell death. These are just two different ways of looking at how the manifestation of different neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's manifests in the brain, and then how you would deliver the infrared stimulation in order to affect treatment. So if we're talking about a optimal treatment effect of approach, we're going to look at being able to confer neuroprotection, neuroregeneration. We're going to want to prevent toxic protein accumulation, and we're also going to want to increase specific neurotransmitter production and regulation. We're also going to want to normalize neuronal connectivity, and that's what we see as being the major contribution for neurofeedback. This is a slide that just shows the different contributors to dementia in Dale Bredesen's RECODE program, and he calls these the holes in the roof. And what you can see is that any one of the ones with an X next to it has evidence in the peer-reviewed literature showing that photobiomodulation can be effective in mitigating those downsides. These are just some of the things that people can really focus on now in order to mitigate the downside risk of developing dementia. And I mean, they're pretty standard things that people can do, and they basically fall into living a basically healthy lifestyle, as well as getting involved in functional medicine in order to understand what some of the underlying contributors may be to things like increased blood pressure or cortisol or inflammation, and doing things to mitigate those kind of downside risks. This is the device that we're using in the clinical trial. It's got about 1,100 LEDs, and it delivers light, as you can see, transcranially and also intraocular. So people are sitting with this on their head for about 6 minutes twice a day, every day at home. And they're doing the procedure about 5 hours apart twice a day. And it's a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. This is the Vielight that we've gotten into using as a treatment approach for people at the end of the study who want to continue to use photobiomodulation and who are not able to participate in the longer-term trials that uses the Cognitolight, but they want to use the Vielight device, and we have a relationship with Vielight, so we can get a discount on those and pass it along to people. And we continue to measure their progress and consult on their progress using both the Vielight and home-based neurofeedback training. These are some of the things that people have been treating with photobiomodulation over the years, and these all have peer-reviewed literature associated with them. So Baylor, Scott, and White got interested in what we were doing, and they got their IRB to approve a 12-person study that was going to be run as a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. And so they did the mini-mental status exam before and after 28 days of treatment. People took the devices home and used them twice a day for 6 minutes, as I said, and came back and did before and after neuropsych batteries and quantitative EEGs. So here we can see that before and after treatment shows a 3-point increase, which is significant at 0.05 with the mini-mental status exam. This is a before and after treatment using the clock drawing test, and this was pretty impressive. And these are some of the results from the neuropsych battery. So you can see that immediate word recall, delayed word recall, logical memory, for praxis memory, and long-term memory all showed rather significant improvements. Again, this is 28 days. The current trial is 60 days. So here's a look at the Q of one of the subjects who was in the placebo arm in the study. Basically, there's not much change there. And then when you look at the active treatment, what we see is a rather significant change in the slow wave activity, especially the delta activity, and also more profoundly in the hypocoherence. So I was surprised, but encouraged by the changes from 28 days. I was also encouraged by the changes in the coherence, but obviously there's still considerable hypocoherence going on. And that's why I think the neurofeedback is critical to getting the most out of the treatment process, because I think that renormalizing the overall EEG activity is going to establish a pattern that's going to contain and support the continued improvement in the brain tissue functioning in terms of increased oxygenation, blood flow, and reduced inflammation. So one particular person that I worked with was a woman named Joan, and that's how she looked in 2011 and 12, and we got started with her doing the infrared light by itself in the office, and then I got her doing some neurofeedback in 2014. She was pretty advanced. She was nonverbal. She was pretty aggressive and basically very withdrawn and isolated. Her husband was worried about whether she was going to be able to stay home or whether he was going to have to put her in a nursing home. Got her into neurofeedback in 2014 and started doing full cap neurofeedback along with having the infrared helmet twice a day at home. And in 2014, she was able to take an 800-mile motorcycle ride with her husband. They had been doing that for years and years with a group of friends, and she hadn't been able to do it for several years. But now she was able to stay on the back of the bike and manage 4 days of travel. Then you can see her doing the trip again in 2015, and there's a pretty significant change in her affect. And then you can see 2016 and 2017. And we've now started doing transcranial direct current stimulation using the PACS neurofield equipment, as well as continuing with the helmet, the infrared, and the neurofeedback. And here's 2018, out with her husband. She's able to be at home and manages to, continue to function. There's a video of her swimming in the swimming pool at her house. She hadn't been able to swim, so she's been able to regain some of her functioning. But when you start out in an advanced stage of dementia, the amount of recovery you can expect isn't the same as if you start at the beginning when you first start to see symptoms. So we're really working on developing ways to pick up the beginning phases and the beginning stages of neurodegeneration using things like ocular tomography that you can do in an optometrist's office, just a picture of the retina, and then measuring the amount of amyloid load in the retinal tissue. And you can predict onset of symptoms from just an OCT exam by 10 or 15 years before symptoms start to show. So that gives us plenty of leeway to start doing things both in terms of reducing inflammation, increasing cortical and connectivity, neuronal connectivity, and other aspects of lifestyle so that people can actually mitigate the risk of developing dementia. So that's where we are. And I'd like to start here with some questions and kind of talk about cases and hear what people have been using, the Vielight and other technologies for, and let's see if we can take things to another level in terms of understanding how to integrate the neurofeedback with photobiomodulation and functional medicine. I'm now being quiet. Richard?
Yeah, I can hear you. Just
okay.
Let me stir the pot a little bit. We've been using the Vielight.
Well, let's. Yeah. How many people are? Yeah.
We've got 27 people.
So, okay. So I don't see anything in the chat area.
Dr. Berman?
Right. Yeah. Can I be Marvin? Everybody knows I'm a doctor.
Okay. Hey, Marvin. This is Lori Miller from Denver.
Hey, Lori.
Hey there. Really great to hear your talk today. And just a quick question with Joan, for instance. Did she do the NIR captive Vielight? Is that part of the methodology that you've been using with her?
No, we were using the Cognitolite, the big helmet.
Okay, and so that is my question then, is there a big difference between those two devices? In other words, the Vielight is Cognitolite.
Well, yeah, there's a difference in the penetration in the pure water molecule. There's a much bigger penetration in the 800 range, but then it drops off precipitously and then comes back up almost to the same level at 1065 to 1075. And what hasn't been done, what hasn't been done is a clear bench science type comparison of the biological impact of the 800 versus the 1065. But what I can tell you from the bench science that was done at Durham, that there is significant increases in things like VEGF, or ventromedial endothelial growth factor, phosphorylated tau, and A beta 42, which are significant proteins involved in neurodegenerative conditions. And so we're keen on using the 1065. The other thing is that in physics, there's a principle called constructive interference, and that's when waves are landing on top of each other. It increases the penetration of the impact of the waves themselves. So when you've got 1,100 LEDs producing photon activity as opposed to 4 with the Vielight, you're going to get a different pattern of constructive interference. The other thing is that the intranasal device, the intranasal component of the Vielight, is definitely stimulating the blood, and your entire blood supply passes through your face every 4 minutes. So you can stimulate your entire blood supply 5 times when doing the standard 20-minute session with the Vielight. And we now recently saw that there's mitochondrial DNA in blood.
Right.
So, there is something to be said about sticking that thing up your nose. Not necessarily that the photons are making it into the frontal lobe, which I doubt seriously, but certainly there's something constructive going on.
Okay, and so what you're saying is that the main benefit for using the Vielight is use it with the nasal device, because the nasal device will help with blood flow, especially in that frontal kind of infraorbital kind of area, which can impact obviously the cingulate.
For sure. And we've also seen Reza Zamodi just published something in Nature. It was a case report, or it was a kind of a basic report in, I think, Nature, that showed about the changes in brain oscillation in EEG from the stimulation done using the gamma and the Vielight gamma. So basically, they took the demo that Lou and I did at ISNR and redid it and published it, which is great.
Okay.
So there's real benefit. There's entrainment benefit to the transcranial component, and there's real benefit in terms of blood stimulation. And given what's going on with the coronavirus, I would strongly encourage everybody to get one of the 810 intranasals and be sticking it up their both nostrils every day, frankly.
Okay, and then just one last question, which had to do with that slide with the mechanism. I didn't obviously write everything down, but I am curious about those heat shock proteins. I have a client that has been working with Dr. Lombard, who's connected us with Dr. Abreu at Yale, and he has a device called the BTT. I'm wondering if you can comment on that and maybe just tell us a little bit about brain temperature, because it's something that's kind of under the radar, so to speak, right now, but might really have some great clinical applications.
Well, I certainly think that we can make a correlation, at least conceptually, between neuroinflammation and brain temperature. So beyond that, I don't really, I can't really comment because I don't know how the BTT's mechanism works. But I definitely think that, as you increase blood flow, that we know for sure, that as you increase blood flow, you're decreasing inflammation. And what a guy named Spill at MIT did a while back is he measured the amount of blood flow that the blood flow change in terms of increase when the neuron fires, and there's a 30% increase in blood flow at the firing of a neuron. However, it only takes 4% of that 30% to recharge the neuron so it can fire again. So then what's the other 24% for, right? I think it's pretty safe to say that it's operating like a radiator and taking the heat away. So I think that's what the folks, I think that's what the BTT principle is based on. And I certainly support, that kind of thinking in terms of why we want to be doing the photobiomodulation at the same time as we're doing neurofeedback.
Yeah, it seems pretty powerful. I'm really appreciating your talk today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Marvin, this is Judy Pritchison in New Jersey. I have a couple of questions.
New Jersey.
New Jersey, right?
Yay.
All of our colleges just about now are closed. They're doing it all.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm looking, can you talk a little bit about some of the choices of when to use gamma and when to use alpha?
Let me start out with I'm a fan of both. And what we have been nudging Vielight to do over the years was to give us the option of being able to modulate the frequency in relationship to EEG activity, specifically changes in Z-scores on the Q. But the closest they could take it was to create the duo so that you can have both the 10 and the 40 at the same time. I think that because we're talking about, in one sense, increasing processing speed, we also might be increasing the potential for agitation. And especially if people are overdosing themselves with the gamma, which is pretty easy. I definitely would encourage everybody to take the use our 5-minute stepwise process for any of the Vielight technology. We coach people a lot about how to use the Vielight well beyond what's in the instructions. And that's why we keep encouraging people to have them buy the Vielight from us so we can do the technical and the clinical consulting. But in any event, you want to get people to use the gamma and use the alpha as a way to keep people centered and kind of grounded while they're also increasing processing speed. So the 5-minute process, just so you know, is that we tell people to turn the lights on for 5 minutes and then stop and wait for at least 5 or 10 minutes initially when you're using it, and notice whether you have any sense of that flu-like feeling of your head feeling like a grapefruit, or agitation, or sleepy, or tired. So tired, sleepy, agitated, or even dizzy from the stimulation. And if you don't have any of that going on, then do another 5 minutes and then check again. And just do that until you're up to 20 minutes so that you really can dose yourself to what you're capable of tolerating and using efficiently. Is that enough?
Do you mean whether or not you're using alpha or gamma, or were you just
irrelevant? Yeah, independent. Yeah, irrelevant of which frequency. Use the 5-minute protocol just so people don't go, hey, I'm getting a headache. What? This thing is no good. I'm sending it back.
Okay, and so since I'm going to get one from you, and you'll give us all the information about how to do that, and then I can get some guidance about that from your people?
Oh, we will talk to you. Yeah, I mean, we will talk to you about the case and the presenting symptoms. I'll do that with you, and then we'll figure out what the protocol should be for that person. So I would do that on a case-by-case basis for everybody.
Okay, and then the recruiting for the 3rd clinical trial. I have some new people come to me for early cognitive decline because their parents had early cognitive decline and they're concerned. So I don't talk about that?
They're not eligible. They're not eligible for the study. You have to come in with an independent diagnosis of early to mid-stage dementia, and non-vascular. But we're getting a lot of people who are concerned exactly from that perspective, and that's why we're getting them involved in this functional medicine assessment that we're doing with an organization called realhealthclinics.com. Real Health Clinics. It's a guy named Tom Lewis, and Tom's developed a way of doing an overall functional assessment that doesn't involve a lot of expensive labs, but gives a really good understanding of where you are in terms of neuroinflammation. And then we can combine that with the QEEG, and that gives us a good starting point for how to use the photobiomodulation. So we're really trying to put all three legs of the stool together, because you really have to deal with the underlying pathology, which from a neuroinflammation point of view really has to be addressed from what's being called functional medicine. Then in terms of improving blood flow and ATP and the whole neuroimmunological level, that's where you want to use the photobiomodulation. And from our point of view, none of that's really going to be useful if you've not reestablished what normal connectivity is. So that's really the three pieces of how this seems to need to go.
Thanks.
Okay.
Well, sure.
And yeah, definitely give me a call.
I will.
610-940-0488 is the foundation number, and my cell phone is connected to that. So if I'm not here, I'll get the call. And quietmindfdn.org is the website. And I think that people who are doing, New Mind neurofeedback, this is definitely the two pieces that need to be incorporated. And I know Richard's, made a serious attempt at getting everybody to start thinking about nutrition and inflammation and how to deal with that in relationship to, neurofeedback. So the only piece that I feel like I'm adding to what's already in place is the Vielight and the Cognitolite and, the other types of photobiomodulation that we're looking at, because we're going to be looking at a full body intervention as well, using something called the Novo Thor from Thor Laser in the UK. And we're going to have one of those here doing a study probably in the summer, where people are going to do full body stimulation using the Novo Thor, as well as the infrared photobiomodulation, transcranial. And we'll compare that against just the transcranial by itself.
Marvin, hi, this is Bree.
Oh, hi, Bree.
Hey, wondering if that Novothor is actually going to be infrared for the whole body. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
Okay, because I've been holding off in terms of buying anything like that. It seems to be the big trend these days, and I just figured I needed more information. Can you tell me compared
can you buy me one too?
Huh?
They're only $120,000.
Oh, I hear. Okay. So in other words, the devices out there that are $1,000 don't do the same thing.
Good point.
I also heard through the grapevine that there was something else coming out from Vielight in terms of treating deeper into the brainstem. Did I hear that correctly? Yeah.
The X Plus.
Yeah.
The X Plus is out, and definitely anybody who's got movement disorder issues, combining the Duo with the X Plus is a really good idea. But it's continuous stimulation of both red and infrared, and so it's a different treatment animal. The other thing that Lou is doing is going to be coming out with something that uses light as a way to do vagal nerve stimulation, and that'll be out in the not too distant future. That's going to be really important. That's going to be an important tool in the toolbox as well, that will be able to do vagal nerve stimulation just using the light pulse.
Okay, so the one you were just talking about for the brainstem. X plus. Okay, when is that?
we can get all that for you, no problem. But it's a different way. It's a different aspect. It's a different treatment entirely, really. But it has its own benefits. Yeah.
So that's already on the market?
Yep.
And what you're saying is it has its own. Do you still use the Vielight headgear with it?
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't drop one for the other. Absolutely not.
So it's not like just a different frequency of the Vielight. It's a completely separate unit.
Well, it's a separate device that uses a different controller box and everything. But it's getting at the point that I think Lou was getting at with that is it's good for pain management, but I think it's also because when we started talking about Parkinson's and identifying the root issue in Parkinson's being the loss of dopamine neurons in the substantia nigra rather than anywhere else. That's what I was showing in that slide, discriminating between where the light goes in Parkinson's versus dementia. And really, it's really down at the base of the skull, in the foraminal notch under the inion. Yeah, under the inion. So if you get the light in there, you have a better shot at stimulating the substantia nigra and protecting the dopamine neurons there.
Well,
and that's going to help with Parkinson's.
Well, the people I'm thinking about don't necessarily have Parkinson's, but one person had a broken neck, and and then other
anything that's going to promote healing. Yeah, anything that's going to promote the healing. Yeah, I mean that's right. Anything that's going to promote healing, you would stimulate using the X Plus.
And I would imagine it could also really enhance energy production.
Well, again, ATP,
Yeah.
Again, ATP would,
At that level. Okay, thanks, Marvin.
Sure.
Marvin, this is Mike Griffin in North Carolina.
Mike Griffin, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. I hope you are.
Good. Are you sequestered or are you out and about?
Well, somewhat out and about. I have taken a partial retirement, only working 2 days a week. Otherwise, I'm home.
I get it. Well, we're giving serious consideration to closing the office.
Wow, that's a big
It's
step.
a killer. Yeah, it kills me. But speaking of killing me.
Yeah. My question.
Anyway.
Yeah, my question concerns using multiple devices. Right now, most of the photobiomodulation I'm doing is on myself. I have a history of severe TBI at age 13. I'm now 72. And I figure there's not much I can do that will hurt me. Therefore, I'm using Vielight X Plus, Neurogamma, and most recently Vielight Prime.
Yes.
Do you see any contraindication for doing them? Like I use one on one day, another day I use the other device, etc.
I think if you're spreading it out by days, you're not really risking much at all.
All right.
It's when people are, standing in front of the Juve with the Vielight on, and going in the cryo. It's like when they're starting to do 15 things at once, it starts getting dicey.
Right.
But we're using different frequencies. Yeah. So no, I don't see a problem with that, Mike. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also own a Freedom 24 that I used for four or 5 years in my practice. I use it now on myself, and
Great.
I'm throwing that in also.
Sure. Look, it's your stew, Mike. You're the one who's going to know whether you're feeling. I mean, you're going to know whether you're feeling like it's too much.
Right.
If you start having any of the, overstimulation reactions, and that you just back off.
Right. Okay. Well, I am
there is
not...
a dose response curve. I mean, I think that everybody needs to understand that there is a real dose response curve, and that too little is not going to give you much. 6 to 9 minutes is going to give you about as good as you're going to get. And then if you start going over 12 minutes or so, you're really starting to create a negative reaction. So you really don't want to do too much. There is a Goldilocks effect here.
That's interesting. I never considered that. I am so insensitive to stimulation. I just don't feel anything from it except a little bit sharper.
Well, you can always stick yourself with a pin while you're doing it.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. And, you can always call me about that stuff. And and if you need any other equipment, just let me know.
All right. I sure will. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, time.
Have we hit our limit?
Yeah. Time seems to be flying, and we're just about at 1 o'clock at the top of the hour. I had a lot of
How about that?
questions, and it sounded like we had even more interest. So hopefully you can come back again sometime, Marvin.
We can keep this conversation going, because I'm hoping that, that Richard, that we can start looking at changes in, outcomes on the maps, on your maps.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be nice.
From people who are and people who aren't, using photobiomodulation, we can start to look at, by diagnostic category, what benefit do we actually see?
Well, all we have to do is enroll some people in some of the clinics to agree to provide the client numbers of people they have done pre and post maps and used Photobio on, and we can get that archival data to you.
Great. Can we just make that what we'll do the next time?
We can talk about it, see if we get people excited enough to do it. That'd be great.
Okay. Well, everybody get excited, and make sure you wash your hands.
Yes.
And it's quite clear that increasing your immune system's functionality is to everybody's advantage now. And so near infrared stimulation is definitely a non-invasive way of doing that. So give serious thought to getting some of this gear or getting yourself exposed to photobiomodulation during the current insanity.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Marvin, if I want to buy it, how?
Just call me. Yeah, just call me. Call me, and we'll work it out. Just
Okay,
give me a call.
Will do.
All right. All right, guys.
All right.
Thanks for your attention.
Yep. We'll see you all on Friday. Barbara will be doing an in-depth on the emerging pandemic, and we'll be talking about how to protect yourself and your clients, and hope you'll be there on Friday to listen in. So have a great week, and we'll see you all on Friday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.